Hey everybody, what's going on? My name is Jamie Dean, and today I'm going to be sharing with you the latest addition to my retro collection. This is a Nintendo 64 game, one we've actually played on the channel very recently, and that is one of my all-time favorites for the console, Lylat Wars. So, coming out in 1997, Lylat Wars would have been one of the first games I think I managed to pick up for the Nintendo 64. I think 1997 was the year that we got the console. And I remember bringing home Mario Kart 64 and GoldenEye were the two games we picked up for the system at the time. But this was pretty shortly after that, this one came along. And obviously, Lylat Wars, apart from being an amazing game, the big thing with this one is that it came out with the Rumble Pack. This was the first appearance of the Rumble Pack on the Nintendo 64. So very exciting. Lylat Wars obviously called StarFox 64 if you lived anywhere that was not a PAL region. I wasn't entirely sure why that was named. I didn't know if there was like a rights issue there somewhere, or there was some sort of copyright problem or licensing problem. But apparently that Nintendo were worried about a potential confusion from customers with a German media company called StarVox with a V. And so that's why in PAL regions we got Star Wing instead of Star Fox on the Super Nintendo, and Lylat Wars instead of Star Fox 64 for the Nintendo 64. They obviously got over that after those two titles, because everything else has been called Star Fox from that point onwards, just the same as it was in non-PAL, in NTSC regions. But yeah, an odd little, very Nintendo sort of curiosity, that one, I think, in terms of naming. But there it is. So let's go down the table cam here. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to crack this one open. I'm going to show you what is inside the box, give you a look at what we managed to pick up here and the condition that it was in. So that's the cover right there. As you can see, there is some tearing on the front, which is unfortunate. If you're going to have tears on your retro cardboard, the front cover is not the ideal place, obviously, to have tears. But I did manage to get this for a really good price, so I wasn't too fussed about, considering what I paid for it. The tear on the front didn't bother me all that much. But there we go. We got the top. Other than that, I mean, it's this, the big chunky Rumble Pack box. There's the Landmaster. We've got the crew. And is that Star Wolf's ship there, I think? And on top, the big, whatever they're called, girder chuckers. And then we have the back. The back's immaculate. In fact, the box, other than that tear on the front, is in really good condition. They're very difficult to get a box protector for these size boxes. You kind of need to do a bit of a custom job, and they're very expensive. So I am yet to come across a box protector for it, unfortunately. Back of the box shows, as it usually does, some clips of gameplay there. Alright, let's go on into this thing and we'll see what we've actually managed to get inside. So I loved Lylat Wars. Lylat Wars was one of my absolute favourite games on the console. I just adored it. I think it's only recently that I've sort of realized in my sort of adult years that Lylat Wars is really a kind of like an Ikaruga style top-down shooter from a third-person perspective. Like it's got all the same hallmarks of those classic 2D top-down games or side-scrolling games. But for the first time, I feel like put into a 3D sort of third-person perspective. But the way you actually play the game is very much the same as something like Ikaruga. And I never really realized that at the time. It felt different and fresh and new at the time, even though I had played a number of those games and really liked those games on the PC and at arcades and whatnot. And I think that might maybe subconsciously explain why I took to Lylat Wars so easily, and so, you know, like I just loved it straight away, you know, because there was that familiarity to it, even though I didn't realize it at the time. So there we go. There's what we got in the box. So it's a complete in-box collection here. We'll have a look at, there's the cartridge first. Come on. There we go. Cartridge is in really good condition. Very, very nice. And then, of course, we have the Rumble pack as well. Now, I haven't actually checked to see whether this thing has any batteries in it or not, so I'm hoping not. Yes, that's good, because that means the terminals are all going to be lovely and clean. There's no worry about battery acid or anything like that. All right, so there we go. Rumble pack. And you'll notice this insert here, and we've got the manual, I'll get to that in a minute. This insert did not come with the game either, which I think is another reason why I managed to get it so cheaply. It was missing the insert, but I managed to find this one, a custom-made Lylat Wars / StarFox 64 insert that I had made. Now, I bought this as a bundle, so I got this particular game and another game, neither of which had their inserts, and so I had custom inserts made for them through a very lovely chap on eBay. I can't remember their name right now, but I will, if I manage to track down his information, I'll go back and I'll find it and I'll put it in the description below, because they did a really, really nice job on this custom insert. It's really good. Comes flat, you just fold it together, and yeah, it fit everything perfectly. And then, of course, the manual. We got a little bit of creasing on this one. Not in, like, amazing condition, but not terrible. I've certainly got worse. But, you know, this, for me, like, this is what it's all about collecting-wise. It's the manual, you know? Like, this is that lost piece of video gaming that we just don't get anymore in modern games. And, you know, as a kid, when you weren't allowed to be on the system, or maybe you're away from home, going on holiday or whatever, going to grandma's house, and you couldn't take your Nintendo 64 with you, I would always take these and just sort of sit and read these, just lay down on the living room floor and go through these, because I don't know, these are so nostalgic to me, and that's a huge part of what makes this collecting fun for me, is rediscovering these and going through these again for the first time, you know, in 20, 30 plus years. So yeah, very important to me that my games are complete in box with manual, because the manual is the piece that I'm really chasing. Let's have a quick look through the StarFox, or I should say Lylat Wars manual here. So we've got the contents, some info on the controller, how to plug it all in. The prologue, the Lylat system. This small group of planets enjoyed years of prosperity. The inhabitants lived in peace, that is, until Andros came into view. Came into view. Like, didn't arrive or attack. They just saw him, and that threw everything into turmoil. Just laying eyes on him completely fucked up everything. Andros was born and raised on Corneria, fourth planet of the system, and grew to be a brilliant scientist. Dr. Andros had been focusing all his time and energy researching biotechnology. But since Corneria was a peaceful planet, this research went in vain. Over time, his mind became twisted, and his morals became demented. Andros went mad. Now, does it say in here somewhere how exactly Andros took the form of a giant robot head, if he was just a scientist? I'm guessing that must be some sort of creation of his, right? One day, a weapon secretly developed by Andros was unleashed on the residents of Corneria. Andros had turned his back on his homeworld. Well, there you go. That's probably what we're talking about. I'm not going to read all this, by the way. There you go. If you want to have a read through it, you can pause and have a skim. There we got all the crew. Fox McCloud, Peppy Hare, Rob64, the R-Wing, Slippy Toad, Falco Lombardi, the Landmaster, and the Great Fox. Also a cracking Super Smash Bros. Stage, the Great Fox. Very nice. All the controls. A little bit about the setting. or I should say settings. And the main game. So this is what made Lylat Wars really, really interesting for me, was this campaign map. So I don't tend to like playing games over and over again. Like, I really hate repetition. If you know, like a really grindy sort of game is not my cup of tea at all. I hate doing the same thing over and over and over again. I need like fresh input, new input. And you know, Lylat Wars is not a long game. You can play through the campaign start to finish in one sitting. But I think it was this branching campaign map that kept me coming back over and over and over again, as well as, you know, not having very many games to play. Because there was always trying to figure out, like, it wasn't just a flat choice. Like, you didn't get to choose between whether you were going to Sector Y or the Meteo area, and you didn't get to choose from there whether you're going to Fortuna, Catena, or Aquis. Like, you had to figure out what was required in order to get you to those systems, like a certain ranking on the level you've just done, or doing a, you know, a certain level of competency, having certain people alive or not alive at the end of their level. All sorts of things seem to contribute towards where you would go on the branching path. And this is like, you know, back in the days of, excuse me, pre-internet, right? That you couldn't just go on Google and go, how do I get to XYZ? You had to try and figure it out, or find a Nintendo 64 gaming magazine, which I think we had a few of as well. N64 Gamer in Australia was my magazine of choice. And hope that they had some sort of guide in there on how to get around it. And usually they, you know, because they covered a whole bunch of different games, didn't necessarily have that. So you had to try and work it out on your own, you know. And I think that's what kept me coming back to Lylat Wars. But I never got tired of this campaign. Like, it was just the gameplay was so fun. That rail shooter, I don't know, like there's multiple paths in a lot of the levels that you could take to see different variations on that same level. And yeah, trying to figure out how to get to this planet, how to actually get to that planet. What do I need to do to actually get over there? Kept me coming back and back and back. And like, the campaign was brilliant. Like, I really, really enjoyed the Lylat Wars campaign, which is not something you can necessarily say for all Nintendo 64 games. It was very much a, you know, a multiplayer focused console. And that is where a lot of my memories come from. When you talk about the Nintendo 64, Lylat Wars included in that. But this is a campaign, like a solo experience that I very, very, very much enjoyed. Here's a little bit explaining about how the actual gameplay works. 3D scroll mode and all range mode, which did feel very different when you played them. One was sort of just, again, your rail shooter where it's pushing you along through a level. And then there are other parts, perhaps a boss fight, or sometimes entire levels that were all range mode, which basically drops you in an area very much like Rogue Squadron, and you have to fly around freely in that area and do what you need to do, defeat the enemies, complete the objectives. A little bit of a look at the screen display. The power-ups. Lasers, always good. You had 3 levels of power-up: the single laser, the twin laser, and the hyper laser. And the hyper laser being always the one you try and get and hang on to. The smart bombs, never had enough of those. Supply rings, which would recharge your shield, and the middle supply, which was like a super charge up. The shield ring, if you could get all 3 golden shield rings, or 3, there were often more than 3 in a level, but if you every 3 that you got, it increased your shield capacity. And I think it says here, if you get a second lot of 3, it'll give you like an extra life, which never seemed to be a huge issue in Lylat Wars. Like, it wasn't a terribly difficult game, which is also probably why I remember it really fondly, is it wasn't just like brutally punishing. You could, as a child, feasibly finish this campaign, get from the start to the finish and beat the boss. Andros himself was fairly challenging, but and there were a couple of levels there that you sort of had to bash your head against a couple of times, but once you got into the swing of things, I think it was a very finishable game, for lack of a better word. And I think that was really important for embedding it in my memory as a kid. You know, like, this is a game I can actually play and have a chance in. The wing repair, yes. So your ship would actually take damage and your wings could get destroyed and blown off. And if that were the case, it would severely limit your abilities to fly, you know, your maneuverability. So getting the wing repair and keeping those wings in shape was definitely worth doing. And the container. Now, I very rarely ever saw this. Sometimes during the game, a yellow mark will appear at the top of the screen. This means that Rob64 is trying to contact you. Press C right to respond. Sometimes Rob will give you a container. Shoot the container to receive a helpful item inside. So probably like a little bit of a catch-up mechanic, you know, if you're doing poorly. Teamwork. Help your teammates when they're in trouble. Yes. So when you're in a level, you know, like these fucking idiots would always be getting themselves into all sorts of, you know, sticky situations. And if you didn't bail them out of that trouble, they would have to actually pull out of the level and miss the following mission. So you would then have to do the next level without that person. Now, I never noticed a big difference as to whether they were there or not, to be perfectly honest. Sometimes it was a bit of a blessing that they weren't, because then you didn't have to fucking rescue these assholes every 20 seconds. But, you know, maybe it makes the game harder in some way. I don't know. All right. A little bit about your ranking. And this is, again, largely what influences your branching paths. And then we get into some maneuvers, like the boost and the brake, so you could speed up, slow down. The somersault and the U-turn. Now, the somersault was very, very useful, particularly in multiplayer, and U-turn as well. I remember in multiplayer, I'm sure we'll probably talk about it here in a sec somewhere. I'm guessing we're going to get to a multiplayer section. I'll talk to that in a minute. Rolling was very, very handy because you would deflect incoming lasers when you rolled. Here we go, the battle mode. So battles, like Lylat Wars was a brilliant multiplayer game if you had 4 players. If you had 3, wasn't too bad, but 2, it was just very dull, very humdrum. There was nothing really going on in a 2-player game of Lylat Wars. But 4 players, if you could get a full complement of 4 players, Lylat Wars was just this chaotic blast. It was awesome because there's fucking lasers going off everywhere, lock-on missiles going off everywhere, bombs going off, like, you know, it was just an absolute frenzy, you know, this huge dogfighting frenzy in this big open space. And it would often devolve into a case of who could nail their somersaults the best, because, you know, you'd have 2 R-wings flying along, and this one would somersault, and then this one would somersault, and then this one would somersault, and you sort of do this leapfrog thing until one of you fucked it up and got locked on and hit with a missile. And then sometimes you would break that chain with a clever U-turn, and they were expecting you to somersault and get away from it altogether. So it was kind of like this rock, paper, scissors kind of game of maneuverability. And I just loved it. I really loved the multiplayer in this game. Again, only with 4 though. If you had less than 4, there were other games that were a lot better with fewer players for multiplayer. But 4-player Lylat Wars, I feel like there weren't too many games on the system. You know, that stacked up. Like, it was in the top pantheon, I think, in terms of 4-player fun. At like a sleepover, like when I had sleepovers or birthday parties, whatever, Lylat Wars was absolutely a staple that we would always play every single time. So you'd have your point match, your battle royale, your time trials. We never played time trials. We always just wanted to shoot each other down. And then we got some information here. You've got your map screen. This game is full of many hidden surprises, and that's what made it wonderful. Branching out. Oh, here we go. Look at that. Should have read the manual. I've just seen it. Look, it literally shows you here. How? Below is a list of the conditions you need to meet. I'm trying to remember now if I ever looked at this manual and realized that, or whether I was just fucking around trying to figure out how exactly to find the branching paths. Read your manual, kids, okay? The instructions explain the fucking game. Oh my god. That's just blown my mind right now. So if you keep Falco alive and fly through the 7 stone archways in Corneria. Fly through every warp gate, defeat Starwolf within the allotted time limit, defeat the boss before Slippy disappears, etc, etc, etc. So a list of different things you have to do in order to change the destination of where, like, the default path, which is basically just a linear straight line from beginning to end along the lower half of the sector. But if you could do some of these things, you'd be able to branch out and go somewhere different, which is cool. And the Rumble Pack. So I think we only had one Rumble Pack in my family, which would have been the one that came with Lylat Wars, and there was always fights. There were always fights in my house. I had 3 younger brothers, so we had, you know, a family of 6, and there were always arguments about who was going to get to use the Rumble Pack, you know. Every time. Thanks, Nintendo, for all those happy family memories. But the good old Rumble Pack, wasn't that groundbreaking at the time? Like, I felt like it was anyway. Like, actually being able to feel the ship rumble when you got hit was like, holy shit, this technology is fucking crazy, man. You know, like, it was great. It was just like, and it was like, there wasn't a whole, there were a few levels of rumble, I guess, but it wasn't super subtle or anything like that. It's nothing like the Joy-Cons now. It was just like, brrr, and you'd hear it like, you hear this fucking thing just like rattling away in the, in the controller socket, like, especially at the end of a Lylat Wars level where they use the boost and boost off, and you're just sitting there going, brrr. Oh, good times. Good times. But there it is. That's the manual for Lylat Wars. You can see we just got some spaces for notes so that nobody ever writes in. I never wrote in. I never wanted to write in my manuals. Warranty info, and that is that. So there we go. Lylat Wars. A great game. One that I remember very, very, very fondly. One of my absolute favorites, like I said, on the Nintendo 64. And this was my first encounter with Lylat Wars. I never owned a Super Nintendo. I didn't own any 16-bit console. So I completely missed Starwing / StarFox. And this was the first time I encountered this kind of game. And yeah, just fell in love. It's also the only StarFox game I ever played. I never played any of the successors on the GameCube or on the Wii U. This was where it started and ended for me. I don't know why. I don't know why I didn't pick up the successors. I think there was like Star Fox Adventures, which sort of looked a bit more like a, you know, a Zelda style run around on the planet as Fox McCloud kind of game. And I think I wanted more of this. And I know there was another one of these on the GameCube. The name escapes me at the moment. But yeah, I've got no idea why I never picked that up. Maybe I'd moved on to other things by then. But yeah, one of those little curios from my past as to, you know, why I never discovered the sequels to one of my favorite games on a console. Maybe I'll have to go back if I get the opportunity and have a go at those one day. But yeah, very, very, very much loved from me. Lylat Wars. Now, this is a game that I actually already owned and had in my collection, but I just had a loose cartridge in a reproduction box. I've probably got it sitting. I do. Hang on. There it is. There's my repro box with it, just this loose cartridge. Like it says Rumble Pack included, but it's obviously just the skinny little box. All that's in here is a loose cartridge and nothing else in a repro insert as well. But this will be probably finding a new home somewhere else and being replaced now with the actual genuine article in its proper box with its Rumble Pack, with its manual, and with its lovely custom insert to fit it all in. Yeah. Really, really happy with that. Really, really happy to finally have that one have it in the collection in its full and whole form. Despite the little tear on the front, again, for the price I paid, I'm really not that worried about that. Now, like I said, in addition to Lylat Wars here, I also managed to pick up a second game as part of a bundle deal. And I was well happy getting Lylat Wars, but the other game that came in that bundle is just fucking kind of unbelievable to me. It's unbelievable that I managed to get it, and it's unbelievable that I managed to get it for the price that I got it for as a 2-pack of games. Yeah, I can't wait to show you that one because it is, I have it literally sitting on my desk over there, and every time I look at it, I still can't quite believe that it's here. It's one of those huge unobtainable games that I never ever in a million years thought that I'd actually own in physical form. So make sure you come back next week and check out the other half of this bundle deal that I managed to pick up, and I'll show you exactly what that game was. But until then, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for hanging out. My name has been Jamie Dean, and as always, make sure you keep on side-scrolling. Take it easy.